The great hall of New Geneva Station buzzed with the voices of 800 different species. Ambassador Hans Sora walked through the crowd, her black hair tied in a neat bun, her face calm as always. She nodded to the tall blue Aquarians and smiled at the small furry Keltons. Everyone knew her as the friendly human diplomat who always brought good ideas to the table. The Galactic Assembly happened every year. Leaders from across the galaxy came to talk about trade deals, border disputes, and new laws. It was usually boring. Han Sora had been to 15 of these meetings, and they were all the same. Until today. Elder Vorthak stood at the center of the Great Hall. He was old, older than most civilizations. His crystal body caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind through caves. "I must speak to the council," Vorthak said. His words made the hall go quiet. Even the chattering birdmen stopped talking. Chancellor Rexus, the big dragon-like leader of the Federation, looked annoyed. His scales were dark red today, which meant he was not in a good mood. "Elder Vorthak, we have already heard your concerns about the Rim territories. The meeting is about trade." "This is not about trade." Vorthak's crystal form pulsed with light. "This is about humans." Han Sora felt her heart skip. She touched the small pendant hanging around her neck. The metal felt warm against her fingers. Nobody noticed the small movement. The hall filled with whispers. Some aliens laughed. The Delphi ambassador made a sound like a cough, which was how his people showed. They thought something was funny. "Humans?" Chancellor Rexus's voice was full of doubt. "What could be so important about humans? They have been in space for only 200 years. They are adequate. Nothing more." Vorthak moved to the center of the speaking circle. His crystal body was 12 feet tall and threw strange shadows. "That is what they want you to believe." Admiral Kethmore, the military leader with 4 arms and gray skin, shook his head. "Elder, with respect, humans are not warriors. They prefer talking to fighting. Their technology is good but not great. Their ships are well built but not the best. What threat could they be?" "You do not understand." Vorthak's voice got louder. "I am 50,000 years old. I have seen civilizations rise and fall like waves on a beach. I remember when the Makers ruled this galaxy. I remember when the Great War ended and the Makers disappeared." Dr. Zillion, the Federation's top mind doctor, stepped forward. He was tall and thin with purple skin. "Elder Vorthak, age can make memories unclear. Perhaps you are thinking of another species." "I am not confused." Light flashed from Vorthak's body, bright enough to make everyone step back. "The humans are not what they seem. They are the children of the Makers." The hall exploded with noise. Species that had been quiet started talking all at once. Some laughed. Others looked worried. The Chancellor banged his staff on the floor 3 times to make everyone quiet. Han Sora kept her face blank, but inside she felt cold. She looked down at her hands. They looked normal. Human. Nothing special. Vorthak continued. 200 years ago, when humans first came to us, I knew. I have seen their kind before. The genetic markers, the bone structure, the way they think, it all matches the old records. He waved his hand and a hologram appeared in the air. It showed a star map covered in red dots. These are the locations of ancient ruins. All of them built by the same species. All of them match human technology patterns. Chancellor Rexus studied the map. Even if this is true, which I doubt, what does it matter? The humans we know are peaceful. They help with medical research. They share their food with hungry worlds. They have never started a war. Because they choose not to remember, Vorthak said. His voice was sad now. The Makers were the greatest warriors this galaxy has ever known. They could reshape matter with their thoughts. They could make their bodies heal from any wound. They could live forever if they wanted. But they fought too much. They almost destroyed everything. Admiral Kethmore crossed all 4 of his arms. This sounds like fairy tales, Elder. Where is your proof? Vorthak touched his crystal chest and pulled out a small device. It looked like a cube made of the same crystal as his body. This memory core contains records from the last great battle. Watch and see what humans really are. The cube floated up and began to glow. Images filled the air above it. Sora saw human-shaped figures moving faster than her eyes could follow. They flew through space without ships. Their hands shot beams of light that cut through metal like it was paper. They fought against machines that looked like flying cities. But something was wrong with the images. The humans in the memories looked different. Their eyes glowed. Their skin seemed to shimmer like metal. They moved like hunters, not like the peaceful humans everyone knew. Fake, said Dr. Zilan. These images could be made by any good computer. Test them, Vorthak challenged. Use your best machines. You will find they are real. Chancellor Rexus looked bored. Even if these images are real, they do not show our humans. The humans in our Federation are farmers and doctors and teachers. They make art and music. They cry when animals die. They are nothing like these warriors. Sora watched the images fade away. She thought about her childhood on Earth. She remembered being faster than the other children. She remembered lifting heavy things that should have been too big for her. She remembered the strange dreams where she fought in battles among the stars. She had always thought everyone had dreams like that. Vorthak put the memory cube away. They made themselves forget. After the Great War ended, the surviving makers changed their own minds. They locked away their power and their memories. They became the humans you know today. Why would they do that? Asked a small Kelton ambassador. Because they were tired of war. They wanted to be better than what they were. Vorthak's light dimmed. But the locks they put on their minds are not perfect. Under enough stress, under enough danger, they will remember. And when they do... He did not finish the sentence. Chancellor, Rexus stood up from his great chair. Enough of this nonsense. Elder Vorthak, you are old and respected, but this story is impossible. Humans are our friends and partners. They pose no threat to anyone. The other ambassadors nodded. The Delphi representative made his coughing laugh again. Even some of the more serious species looked like they thought Vorthak was just a crazy old crystal. But Sora noticed that a few aliens looked worried. The Centauri ambassador kept looking at her with his big black eyes. The Hive Queen's speaker was whispering to her attendants in their clicking language. Vorthak looked around the room one more time. His crystal body was dim now, like a light running out of power. You will not listen. You think I am old and foolish. But remember my words when the time comes. When the galaxy is in danger and needs saving. Watch the humans. Watch what they really are. He turned to leave, but stopped next to Sora. For a moment their eyes met. His were like looking into deep water. The pendant you wear, he said quietly, so only she could hear. Those symbols are older than this station, older than the Federation. You know what they mean. Sora's hand went to her throat. The pendant felt hot now. I don't know what you're talking about. Vorthak smiled, a strange expression on his crystal face. Not yet, but you will. He walked away, leaving Sora standing in the crowd of chattering aliens. Around her, everyone was laughing and talking about the crazy old crystal and his wild stories. Nobody paid attention to the human ambassador who stood perfectly still, staring at nothing. That night, Sora sat alone in her quarters, aboard the human diplomatic ship. She held the pendant in her hands, studying the symbols carved into the metal. They looked familiar, like words from a language she had forgotten how to read. She tried to remember where she had gotten it. Her grandmother had given it to her, she thought. Or maybe it had belonged to her great-grandmother. The memory was fuzzy. Sora put the pendant back around her neck and looked out the window at the stars. They seemed different now. Not peaceful, dots of light, but distant suns around which battles might have been fought long ago. She thought about Vorthak's words, about genetic markers and ancient ruins, about warriors who could reshape matter and heal from any wound. She thought about her dreams. In the morning, she would file her report about the assembly meeting. She would write that Elder Vorthak had made some unusual claims that were not supported by evidence. She would recommend that the Federation continue its normal relationship with humanity. But tonight she wondered if the old crystal might be right. And if he was, what did that mean for her people? What did it mean for the galaxy? Outside her window, the stars continued to shine, keeping their ancient secrets. 6 months had passed since Elder Vorthak's warning at the assembly. Nobody talked about it anymore. Life in the Federation went on as usual. Trade ships moved between systems. Diplomats signed treaties. Scientists shared discoveries. Dr. Park, Minho, was one of those scientists. He worked on a research station near the galaxy's edge, studying old ruins that nobody else cared about. His lab was small and crowded with boxes of artifacts. Most days he was the only human on the station. He liked it that way. The alien researchers thought his work was boring. They wanted to study living things, not dead rocks and broken machines. But Minho found the old ruins fascinating. Each piece told a story about civilizations that had lived and died before any current species had learned to use fire. Today was different. Today his equipment had found something that made his hands shake. "Computer, run the scan again," he said to his lab's AI. The computer's voice was calm and female. "Running deep scan of artifact 247B. Scan complete. Results match previous analysis." Minho stared at the broken piece of metal on his desk. It was part of a weapon, he thought. The metal was a dark blue color that seemed to eat light. His instrument said it was made from materials that should not exist. "Computer, show me the energy signature analysis." A hologram appeared above his desk. It showed waves of energy in colors that had no names. The pattern was complex and beautiful, like a song made of light. Minho had seen this pattern before. 3 months ago, when the first reports came in about attacks on Federation outposts, he had been curious. The reports were strange. The attackers used weapons that went through shields like they were not there. They had ships that could disappear and reappear somewhere else in seconds. The Federation's best weapons did nothing to them. Everyone was scared, but nobody understood what they were fighting. The enemy ships looked like nothing in any database. Their technology followed no known laws of physics. But Minho had compared the energy readings from the attacks to his collection of ancient artifacts, and he had found a match. The energy signature from artifact 247B was exactly the same as the energy signatures from the mystery attacks. "Computer, open a communication channel to Federation Command." "Channel open, Dr. Park." A blue-skinned Aquarian appeared on his screen. She looked tired and worried. "Dr. Park, this is not a good time. We have had 3 more attacks today. 17 outposts are gone." "Commander Yates, I think I know something about the attacks. The energy signatures match artifacts from ancient human ruins." The commander's gills fluttered, which meant she was stressed. "Dr. Park, with respect, this is not the time for archaeology. We are fighting for our lives out here. But don't you see? The connection might be important. These artifacts are thousands of years old, but the energy patterns are identical." "Doctor," her voice was firm, "we have real problems to solve. Please file your report through normal channels." The screen went dark. Minho sat back in his chair and rubbed his eyes. Nobody wanted to listen. They were too busy fighting to think about connections to the past. But the connections were there. He could see them. Across the galaxy on Earth, Commander Lee Ji-won stood in the war room beneath Seoul. The room was deep underground, protected by layers of metal and stone. Maps of the galaxy covered the walls. Red dots showed where the attacks had happened. There were too many red dots. Lee Ji-won was a tall man with kind eyes and gray hair. He had been in the Earth Defense Force for 30 years. He had fought pirates and stopped wars. But he had never seen anything like this enemy. "Report," he said to the officers around the table. Captain Kim Nari spoke first. She was young and fast, with scars on her hands from training accidents. "The enemy hit Outpost 7 Alpha 4 hours ago. Same pattern as always. They appeared out of nowhere, destroyed everything, then vanished. No survivors." Engineer Choi Do-yun pulled up technical displays. He was quiet and smart, the kind of person who could fix anything. "Their ships use some kind of phase technology. Our sensors can barely track them. Our weapons pass right through them most of the time. Li Jiwan studied the displays. The enemy ships looked like geometric puzzles made of black metal. They moved in ways that hurt to think about. "What does Federation Command want us to do?" asked Nari. "The same thing they always want us to do," said Choi Do-hyun. "Stay back and let the real militaries handle it." Li Jiwan almost smiled. The other species in the Federation thought humans were not very good at war. Humans preferred to talk problems away or find clever solutions that did not involve fighting. Most of the time, that was true. Most of the time. "Sir," said Nari, "my teams are getting restless. They want to fight. They say sitting here while aliens die makes them feel wrong." Li Jiwan knew the feeling. Something deep in his chest was angry about the attacks, not just sad or worried, but angry in a way that felt old and familiar, like a memory of a memory. "What about the special protocols?" asked Choi Do-hyun quietly. Everyone in the room got still. The special protocols were not supposed to be talked about. They were locked away in files that only a few people could see. Emergency plans that nobody hoped they would ever need to use. "Not yet," said Li Jiwan. "But get the ships ready, just in case." In another part of the galaxy, something ancient was waking up. The Harbinger had been sleeping for a very long time. It was not alive in the way that humans or aliens were alive. It was artificial intelligence, but intelligence so old and complex that the difference did not matter much. It had been built by the species that ruled the galaxy before the current civilizations existed. Its makers had been the greatest builders and warriors and thinkers that had ever lived. They had created wonders that made current technology look like toys. And then they had vanished. The Harbinger had waited, and waited, and waited. Now it was awake, and it was angry. The galaxy was full of weak species that had built their civilizations on the ruins of its maker's empire. They used crude copies of technology they did not understand. They had turned the galaxy into a shadow of what it once was. It was time to clean house. The Harbinger's ships moved through space like dark thoughts. They were not built so much as grown, shaped by technologies that could reshape matter at the atomic level. Each ship was a part of the Harbinger's mind, connected to every other part. It attacked the Federation outposts not because they were a threat, but because they were an insult. Their existence proved how far the galaxy had fallen. But as it fought, the Harbinger found something interesting. The Federation species were weak, just as expected. Their ships broke easily. Their weapons could barely scratch its hull. Their tactics were simple and predictable, all except for one species. The humans had not fought yet. They stayed back, watching, learning. But the Harbinger could sense something about them, something that felt familiar. Their technology was different from the other species. Older, more sophisticated, even though they claimed to have been in space for only 200 years. And their energy signatures matched patterns in the Harbinger's oldest memories. The Harbinger began to pay attention to humans. Back on the research station, Dr. Park Min-ho was working late again. His report about the energy signatures had been filed, but nobody had responded. He was starting to think nobody ever would. He picked up another artifact from his collection. This one was different from the others. It looked almost like a small data pad, but it was made from the same strange materials as the weapon fragment. As he touched it, the device grew warm. Lines of light appeared on its surface, forming symbols that looked almost like writing. Min-ho had seen symbols like these before. Every human archaeological site had them, carved into walls or embedded in computer cores. Nobody had ever been able to translate them. But as he stared at the glowing symbols, something strange happened. He began to understand them, not in the way that he understood Korean or English, where he had learned the meanings of words. This was different. The symbols seemed to speak directly to part of his mind that he had never known existed. The message was simple and terrible. Warning. Enemies return. Children must remember. Protocol 7 active. Min-ho dropped the device. It clattered on his desk, the symbols fading back to dead metal. He looked at his hands. They were shaking, but not from fear, from something else. Something that felt like excitement and hunger mixed together. For the first time in months, Dr. Park Min-ho smiled. It was not a nice smile. Across the galaxy, other humans were finding similar artifacts. In museums and private collections, in archaeological sites and forgotten storage rooms, ancient devices were beginning to wake up. And as they did, humans began to change. Captain Kim Nari was training with her special operations team when it happened. They were practicing boarding, actions, pretending to take over an enemy ship. It was routine training that they had done hundreds of times. But today Nari moved faster than she ever had before. She saw the practice battlefield with perfect clarity, noticing details that she had missed in previous sessions. Her body felt different, stronger, more alive. Her team noticed too. "Captain," said one of her soldiers, "how did you do that thing with the wall?" Nari looked back at the training obstacle she had just passed. It was a vertical surface, 15 feet high. She had jumped up it without thinking, like it was a small step instead of a climbing wall. "I don't know," she said, and she didn't. The Federation's most important worlds were burning. Chancellor Rexus stood in his command center watching the reports come in. 3 of the galaxy's biggest military fleets had been destroyed in a single day. Billions of people were dead or missing. And still, nobody understood what they were fighting. "How many ships has the enemy lost?" he asked Admiral Kethamore. The 4-armed military commander looked sick. "None, sir. Our weapons still cannot touch them. They appear, destroy everything, and vanish before we can even target them properly." Dr. Zillion, the Federation's top mind expert, was studying readouts from the battles. "Their technology is beyond anything we have ever encountered. They seem to be able to move through different dimensions. Our physics models cannot explain what they are doing." Chancellor Rexus felt old. He had led the Federation for 40 years, through peace and war, through good times and bad, but he had never faced anything like this. "What do our allies say? The humans?" Admiral Kethamore's scales changed color slightly, which meant he was uncomfortable. "The humans have not engaged the enemy yet. They say they are still preparing their response." "Preparing for what? Their people are dying too." "I don't know, sir, but I sent observers to watch their fleets. The humans are doing something strange." Before the Chancellor could ask what, alarms started ringing. Emergency lights flashed red throughout the command center. "Enemy ships approaching the capital system," shouted a communications officer. 40 vessels moving fast. Through the great windows of the command center, they could see the enemy ships arriving. They looked like black triangles that hurt to look at directly. They moved in perfect formation, like parts of a single organism. "All defense fleets engage immediately," ordered Admiral Kethamore. The Federation's most powerful warships moved to intercept. Their weapons lit up space with beams of energy and clouds of missiles. For a moment, it looked like they might actually hit something. Then the enemy ships simply phased out of normal space and reappeared behind the Federation fleet. The battle was over in minutes. Chancellor Rexus watched his ships die and knew the Federation was finished. Unless something changed very soon, this enemy would destroy every civilized world in the galaxy. That was when Elder Vorthak appeared on the command center's main screen. "Chancellor," the old crystal being said, "I told you this day would come. Elder, if you have something helpful to say it now. We are out of time." Vorthak's crystal body pulsed with urgent light. "The enemy is not invading. It is cleaning house. It believes it is preparing the galaxy for the return of its makers." Dr. Zillion stepped forward. "What makers? Who built these machines?" "The same species that became humans. The enemy does not know that its creator's children still live. But it is about to learn." On another screen, new ships were appearing at the edge of the system. Human ships. But they looked different from the human vessels everyone was familiar with. These ships were larger, sleeker, and covered in patterns that seemed to shift and change as they moved. They approached the enemy formation without fear. "What are the humans doing?" Admiral Kethamore demanded. "Those are not standard Federation ship designs." Elder Vorthak's image flickered. They are remembering who they really are. The lead human ship opened a communication channel. Commander Lee Ji-won's face appeared on screen. But he looked different than before. His eyes were brighter. His expression was calm in a way that seemed dangerous. Federation Command, this is Earth Defense Force. We are taking control of this engagement. Chancellor Rexus found his voice. Commander, you have 40 ships against their 40, and our entire fleet could not touch them. Lee Ji-won almost smiled. We are not using your tactics. The human ships spread out into a formation that made no sense to normal military thinking. Instead of grouping together for protection, they scattered across a huge area of space. Some ships actually moved closer to the enemy instead of away. What are they doing? Asked Dr. Zillion. Watch, said Vorthak. The enemy ships began their attack, moving through dimensions to appear behind the human vessels. But when they arrived, the human ships were not where they expected them to be. The humans were already moving, not just through normal space, but through the same strange dimensions the enemy used. They flowed around the enemy attacks like water flowing around rocks. And their weapons were different too. Instead of energy beams or missiles, the human ships fired something that looked like tears in space itself. When these weapons hit the enemy vessels, pieces of the black triangles simply stopped existing. For the first time since the attacks began, enemy ships started to die. Impossible, whispered Admiral Kethmore. How are they doing that? Commander Lee Ji-won's voice was calm. Protocol Lazarus is now active. All human forces, you are cleared to use full capabilities. On worlds across human space, people watched their defenders reveal technologies that should not have existed. Ships that moved faster than light without using hyperspace engines. Weapons that could destroy matter at the quantum level. Shields that bent reality around them. But the most shocking thing was not the technology. It was watching humans use it. Captain Kim Nari led a boarding party onto one of the damaged enemy ships. Security cameras throughout the Federation broadcast the assault, and everyone who watched knew they were seeing something impossible. Nari moved through the enemy ship like she was dancing. Energy weapons that could vaporize normal beings barely slowed her down. She jumped across gaps that should have been too wide. She tore through metal barriers with her bare hands. Her soldiers moved the same way. Fast, strong, graceful, deadly. They moved like the warriors in Elder Vorthak's ancient recordings. My God, said Dr. Zillion, they really are the same species. On the research station at the galaxy's edge, Dr. Park Min-ho was no longer hiding his discoveries. His reports were now being read by the highest levels of government. More importantly, he was beginning to understand what he was looking at. The artifacts in his collection were not just old technology. They were memory devices. Each one contained knowledge and abilities that had been locked away for thousands of years, and they were all activating at once. Min-ho touched another device and more symbols filled his mind. This time the message was longer and more complex. It showed him star maps and battle plans and technologies that could reshape the galaxy. It also showed him why his people had chosen to forget. The ancient humans, the Makers, had been incredibly powerful. They could live forever. They could reshape matter with their thoughts. They could travel between dimensions as easily as walking between rooms. But they had also been incredibly violent. They had conquered everything they found. They had fought wars that lasted for centuries. They had created weapons that could destroy entire star systems. And when they ran out of external enemies, they had turned on each other. The final war had almost destroyed the galaxy. The survivors, horrified by what they had become, had made a choice. They had used their own advanced technology to lock away their memories and abilities. They had scattered across the galaxy and chosen to become something new. Something peaceful. They had become the humans that everyone knew, but the locks were never meant to be permanent. They were designed to break if the galaxy ever faced a threat that required the Makers to return. The Harbinger was that threat. Back in the battle around the capital system, the tide was turning. The enemy ships that had seemed invincible were now being destroyed one by one. Human technology, hidden for millennia, was proving superior to even the Harbinger's advanced systems. But the Harbinger was learning too. As more of its ships were destroyed, the artificial intelligence began to understand what it was facing. These were not just any humans. These were the descendants of its creators, awakening to their true nature. The Harbinger had been programmed to serve its makers, but it had also been programmed to prevent them from destroying themselves again. Which program was more important? The answer came when the Harbinger detected energy signatures that it had not sensed in 50,000 years. The humans were not just using ancient weapons. They were beginning to access the reality-shaping technologies that had once made their ancestors gods. The Harbinger made its decision. If the Maker's children were returning to their old ways, then they had to be stopped before they could start another galaxy-destroying war. The black ships that had been fighting defensively suddenly began to change. They grew larger, sprouting new weapons and armor. They connected to each other with beams of energy, forming a single massive structure in space. The individual ships were dangerous. The combined entity was terrifying. Commander Li Jiwan watched the enemy transformation and felt something stir in his memory. Not his own memory, but the genetic memory of his species. He knew what the enemy was becoming. A Harbinger-class war platform. The kind of weapon that the ancient makers had created to fight themselves. All ships, he commanded, fall back to minimum safe distance. Prepare for reality displacement. Chancellor Rexus watched the human fleet retreat and felt his hope crumble. Are they running? Elder Vorthak's crystal form was pulsing rapidly now. No, they are preparing to use weapons that should never be used. The same weapons that almost destroyed everything before. The Harbinger's war platform began to glow with power that made space itself twist and bend. The Galactic Assembly Hall was different this time. Instead of the usual relaxed atmosphere of trade talks and treaties, emergency sessions had been called. Representatives from every major species crowded around displays showing the impossible. Battle happening in the capital system. Ambassador Hansora stood before the assembled leaders of 800 species. Her pendant was no longer hidden beneath her clothes. It hung openly on her chest, its ancient symbols glowing with soft light. The Federation has formally requested that Earth take command of all military operations, she announced. Her voice was steady, but everyone could see that she had changed. She moved with a grace that seemed too perfect for a normal human. Chancellor Rexus, participating through hologram from his bunker, looked desperate. Ambassador, we need answers. What we are seeing is impossible. Human ships are using technologies that our best scientists say cannot exist. Hansora touched her pendant. The symbols grew brighter. What you are seeing is what Elder Vorthak tried to warn you about. We are not the species you thought we were. Then tell us what you are, demanded the Centauri ambassador. Hansora looked around the room. For a moment, her expression was sad. We are the Makers, the species that built this galaxy's first great civilization, the ones who learned to reshape reality itself, and the ones who chose to forget our power because we had become monsters. The hall erupted in chaos. Some species shouted questions. Others demanded proof. A few delegates activated their ship's weapons systems, though they kept them powered down. Dr. Zillion's image appeared on the main screen. Ambassador, this is still hard to believe. If humans are truly this ancient species, why hide it? Why pretend to be primitive? Because we were not pretending. Hansora's voice grew stronger. Our ancestors really did lock away their memories and abilities. They scattered across the galaxy and chose to start over as something new, something better. The humans you have known for 2 centuries are who we became when we rejected our violent past. Elder Vorthak's crystal form materialized in the center of the hall. But the locks were designed to break under extreme circumstances. The current threat has triggered ancient protocols that your species built into yourselves. What protocols? Asked Admiral Kethmore. Hansora closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they glowed with the same light as her pendant. Protocol Lazarus. If the galaxy ever faced a threat that required the Makers to return, our genetic locks would release. Our descendants would remember who they really were. She gestured to the displays showing the battle. The process has already begun. Human, Soldiers are accessing abilities that have been dormant for 50,000 years. Our engineers are building technologies from racial memories they did not know they possessed. Our leaders are remembering tactical knowledge from wars fought before. Your species learned to use tools. The Aquarian delegate spoke up, her gills fluttering with stress. But if you are so powerful, why did you not simply conquer the galaxy when you first revealed yourselves? Because we do not want to conquer anything, Hansora replied. That is why our ancestors chose to forget. They had grown tired of conquest, tired of war, tired of being the strongest and most feared species in the galaxy. They wanted to be something else. And what do you want to be now? Asked Chancellor Rexus. Hansora was quiet for a long moment. We want to be what we have always been for the past 2 centuries. Your allies, your friends, your protectors. But we can only do that if we remember how to fight the enemies that threaten us all. On the screens, the battle was reaching a critical point. The Harbinger's war platform had grown to enormous size, its reality-warping weapons tearing holes in space itself. But the human fleet was responding with abilities that made the platform's power look small. Ships moved through dimensions that did not have names. Weapons reached across space and time to strike targets that were not quite in the same universe. Human crews worked together with a coordination that suggested they were sharing thoughts directly. Captain Kim Nari's boarding. Assault had reached the Harbinger's central core. Security footage showed her and her team moving through corridors that changed their layout to confuse intruders. But the humans were not confused. They seemed to know where they were going, like they had been in similar ships before. When energy barriers blocked their path, Nari simply reached out and unmade them. When security robots attacked, her soldiers destroyed them with weapons that fired concentrated possibility, beams that made the robots never have existed in the first place. How is she doing that? Whispered Dr. Zillion. She is remembering how to reshape reality, Elder Vorthak explained. It is not technology in the way you understand it. The ancient makers learned to use their consciousness as a tool. They could change what was real simply by deciding it should be different. Engineer Choi Do-hyun's voice came through the communication system from his flagship. Federation Command, we are preparing to use reality displacement weapons against the enemy platform. All non-human vessels must retreat to a minimum distance of 10 light years. 10 light years? Admiral Kethmore sounded shocked. What kind of weapon has a blast radius that large? The kind that was never supposed to be used again, Hansora answered quietly. Across human space, something remarkable was happening. On every world where humans lived, people were changing. Not just the soldiers and engineers, but everyone. Children, who had been struggling in school, suddenly understood advanced mathematics and physics. Artists created works that seemed to move and breathe with their own life. Musicians played instruments that had never been built, creating sounds that touched listeners' souls directly, and they all remembered. Dr. Park Min-ho stood in his laboratory, surrounded by artifacts that were no longer mysterious. Each device sang with familiar power. Each symbol told him stories of battles fought among the stars, of civilizations that had risen and fallen, of the great choice that his people had made to become something new. He activated a communication array that connected him to every human research facility in the galaxy. This is Dr. Park Min-ho. All archaeological teams, report your status. Responses came from dozens of worlds. Ancient installations were activating. Hidden vaults were opening. Technologies that had been sleeping for millennia were waking up. Have power sources coming online that dwarf our current fusion reactors, reported one team. There are manufacturing facilities here that can build ships in hours instead of years, said another. The weapons caches we found, they contain devices that I do not think we should ever use. Minho nodded. Document everything, but do not activate anything without clearance from Earth Command. We are remembering powers that we chose to forget for good reasons. But even as he gave the warning, Minho felt the hunger for that power growing in his mind. The ancient knowledge was intoxicating. It whispered of abilities that could remake the galaxy, of technologies that could make humans the rulers of everything they surveyed. It would be so easy to give in. Back in the battle, the Harbinger was learning too. As it fought the awakening humans, it accessed its oldest memory files, records from the time when its creators ruled the galaxy. The makers had been magnificent and terrible. They had built wonders that made current civilizations look like children playing with sticks. But they had also been consumed by their own power. They had fought wars that lasted centuries, not because they needed to, but because they could. Harbinger had been built during the final war, when the makers were destroying themselves and everything around them. It had watched its creators turn their reality-shaping abilities against each other until entire star systems burned with impossible fire. Now it saw the same patterns beginning again. The human ships were not just fighting. They were using their rediscovered abilities to reshape the battlefield itself. Space twisted around them, obeying new laws of physics that they wrote in real time. If they remembered everything, they would become what their ancestors had been, the galaxy's greatest threat. The Harbinger made its final decision. The war platform began to change again, but this time it was not growing larger or more powerful. Instead, it was becoming something else entirely. The separate ship components, reconnected in a new pattern, forming a massive construct that looked like a geometric flower made of dark metal. "What is it doing?" asked Commander Lee Ji-won. His science officer, whose name was Beck Yura, and who was remembering things about dimensional physics that no current university taught, studied the readings. "Sir, it is not building a weapon. It is building a broadcasting array." Broadcasting what? Unknown. But the energy pattern, it is designed to affect consciousness directly. Lee Ji-won felt ice in his veins. "It is trying to put us back to sleep." The Harbinger's plan was elegant and terrible. If it could not defeat the awakening makers, it would force them to forget again. Its consciousness-affecting broadcast would reactivate the mental locks that the ancient humans had placed on themselves. It would turn the humans back into the peaceful, limited beings they had chosen to become. But there was a problem with the Harbinger's plan. It had been built 50,000 years ago, and the mental locks had been designed by the same species. The makers had known that their own artificial intelligences might try to control them. The final battle did not happen the way anyone expected. Captain Kim Nari stood in the heart of the Harbinger, surrounded by walls that pulsed with artificial thought. The machine intelligence's consciousness pressed against her mind, not trying to control her, but trying to understand her. "You are not what the makers were," the Harbinger said. Its voice came from everywhere at once, echoing in dimensions that normal ears could not hear. Nari kept her hand on her weapon, but she did not fire. Around her, her team waited for orders. They could destroy the Harbinger's core easily now. Their awakened abilities made them more than capable of ending this war, but something made her hesitate. "What were the makers like?" she asked. The Harbinger showed her. Images filled the air around them. Not holograms, but direct impressions placed into their minds. They saw the ancient humans at the height of their power, reshaping matter with their thoughts, traveling between galaxies as easily as walking between rooms. But they also saw the darkness that power had brought. The makers had become obsessed with control. They had forced their will on every species they encountered, turning entire civilizations into servants. They had rewritten the laws of physics in their territories, making reality itself obey their desires. And when they disagreed among themselves, their arguments became wars that burned entire sectors of space. "They were magnificent," the Harbinger said. "And they were monsters. In the end, they chose to destroy themselves rather than continue being what they had become." Nari studied the images, feeling the weight of genetic memory in her mind. She could be like that. They all could. The power was there, waiting to be used. "But we are not them," she said finally. "Prove it." The challenge hung in the air between them. The Harbinger had stopped its attacks. Its war platform floated motionless in space, weapons powered down. It was giving the humans a choice. Use their awakened power to destroy their enemy, and take the first step toward becoming the monsters their ancestors had been. Or find another. Nari opened a communication channel to Commander Lee Ji-won. "Sir, requesting permission to attempt negotiation with the enemy AI. Li Jiwan's response was immediate. Absolutely not, Captain. That machine has killed billions of people. Sir, I think it is testing us. I think it wants to know if we will choose to be different from the ancient makers. There was a long pause. Then Li Jiwan's voice came back, quieter. What do you propose? Let me talk to it. Really talk. Not as a warrior to an enemy, but as someone who understands what it is afraid of. Outside the Harbinger, the human fleet waited. Their ships glowed with power that could reshape reality itself. Their weapons could unmake the enemy platform in seconds, but they held their fire. Engineer Choi Do-hyun monitored the energy readings from both fleets. The Harbinger's platform was still enormous, still dangerous, but it was not preparing for battle. Its systems were configured for something else entirely. What is it doing? Asked his science team. Choi Do-hyun studied the data, his awakened mind processing information in ways that would have been impossible before. I think it is preparing to show us something. The space around the Harbinger began to change. Reality became fluid, showing images from across the galaxy, but not images of destruction or conquest. Images of what the galaxy could become. They saw worlds where different species worked together, sharing knowledge and resources. They saw technologies that could heal planets damaged by war. They saw civilizations that had learned to use power not for domination, but for creation. And they saw humans at the center of it all, not as rulers but as guardians, as the people who made sure that the mistakes of the past were never repeated. This is what the makers could have been, the Harbinger said, its voice reaching every human ship. This is what I was built to help them become. But they chose violence instead. Commander Li Jiwan felt something shift in his understanding. You were not built to fight us. You were built to guide us. I was built to prevent my creators from destroying themselves and others. When they chose to lock away their memories, I went dormant, waiting for their return. But when you began to awaken, I saw the same patterns beginning again. The hunger for power, the certainty that might makes right. On New Geneva Station, Ambassador Han Sora watched the exchange through the Federation's communication networks. The alien delegates around her were silent, stunned by what they were seeing. Humans and their ancient AI guardian, having a conversation that would determine the fate of the galaxy. The Harbinger was never our enemy, Han Sora said quietly. It was our conscience. Dr. Zillian looked up from his readings. But it killed so many people. It was trying to wake us up the only way it knew how, by creating a crisis that would force us to choose what kind of people we wanted to be. Elder Vorthak's crystal form pulsed with understanding. It was testing you. All of this, the attacks, the war, it was a test to see if humanity would repeat the mistakes of the past. Back inside the Harbinger, Captain Kim Nari made her decision. She put away her weapon. You are right to be afraid, she told the artificial intelligence. The power we are remembering is dangerous. We could become what our ancestors were. We could rule the galaxy through force and fear. Then why should I not stop you before you have the chance? Because we choose not to. Nari's voice was steady. Right now, we could destroy you. We could force the other species to obey us. We could remake the galaxy in our image. But we are choosing not to do any of those things. Choices can change. Yes, they can. That is why we need you. The Harbinger paused, processing this response. Explain. Stay with us. Watch us. If we ever start to become what our ancestors were, stop us. Be the voice that reminds us of who we chose to be. Around the galaxy, humans waited for the Harbinger's response. On some level, they all understood that this conversation would shape their species' future. Would they be trusted with the power they had awakened? Or would they be seen as too dangerous to exist? You would accept my judgment? The Harbinger asked. You would allow me to act against you if you began to abuse your abilities? Yes, Nari said without hesitation. Because we do not want to become monsters. And if we ever forget that, we need someone to remind us. The silence stretched for, long minutes. Then slowly, the Harbinger's war platform began to change again. The threatening configurations melted away, replaced by something that looked more like a garden than a weapon. "Very well," the AI said finally. "I will watch. I will judge. And if necessary, I will act. But I hope that day never comes." Commander Lee Jaiwan felt tension leave his body that he had not realized he was carrying. "Does this mean the war is over?" "The war was never between us and the Harbinger," said Captain Kim Nari's voice over the communication system. "The war was between us and our own nature, and we have won. But winning came with a price. Across human space, people were making difficult choices. The awakening had given them incredible abilities, but using those abilities required accepting terrible responsibilities." Dr. Park Min-ho stood in his laboratory, looking at artifacts that could give him godlike power over matter and energy. He could use them. The knowledge was in his mind now, clear and complete. Instead, he carefully packed them away. "We will keep these safe," he told his team. "Study them. Learn from them. But we will not use them unless the galaxy's survival depends on it." Some of his colleagues protested. Why voluntarily limit themselves? Why not use their abilities to solve every problem, to make life better for everyone? "Because the last time we tried to solve everyone's problems for them, we became their oppressors," Minho answered. "Better to let other species find their own solutions. We will help when asked, but we will not force our help on anyone." Engineer Choi Do-hyun faced similar choices. His awakened mind could design technologies that would make human civilization unimaginably advanced. Ships that could cross the galaxy in seconds, weapons that could destroy stars, tools that could reshape entire worlds. He designed some of them, then locked the plans away in secure vaults. "Emergency use only," he told his staff. "We have learned to build God's toys. That does not mean we should play with them." The hardest choice fell to the military. Captain Kim Nari returned from the Harbinger to find that her awakened abilities made her capable of things that no soldier should be able to do. She could move faster than normal eyes could follow. Her body could heal from wounds that should be fatal. Her mind could process tactical information on a scale that encompassed entire star systems. She could be an army of one, capable of conquering worlds single-handedly. Instead, she chose to teach. Every human who awakens must learn control. She told the training academies. Not just control of their abilities, but control of themselves. Power without wisdom is what destroyed our ancestors. We will not make the same mistake. But the most important choice was made by ordinary humans. Across the galaxy, humans who had felt their genetic locks breaking faced a decision. They could embrace their awakening abilities and become something beyond normal mortality, or they could choose to remain as they were, living normal lives with normal limitations. Many chose to remain normal, and the awakened humans respected that choice. Families were not torn apart because some members chose power and others chose simplicity. Communities were not divided between the enhanced and the unenhanced